once again. We'll turn to Matthew chapter 5. Looking at our function in the Sermon on the Mount life. We already looked at verse 13. We are the salt of the earth. Now verses 14 through 16 we see the image of light. Ye are the light of the world. The city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick. And it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. Ye are the light of the world. Jesus, the one who spoke those words, said in John 8 and verse 12, I am the light of the world. So we need to take those two statements. I am the light of the world. Ye are the light of the world. We need to take those two statements together. Because we are only, you and I are only the light of the world because of a relationship with Him who is the light of the world. Christ went on to say in John 8:12, after He said, I am the light of the world, he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. So we are the receivers of His light. And that is how we become the light of the world. It is His light that we shine forth. It's not our light, it is His light. The psalmist in Psalm 119 verse 130 said, the entrance of thy words giveth life. So this enables the child of God. The entrance of the Word enables the child of God to, again, give forth His light. So the light of Christ, the light of His Word, that's what we shine forth. And His Word is, again, a manifestation of Christ. Paul wrote in Ephesians 5 verse 8, for ye were sometimes darkness. Ye were darkness. Not just in darkness, you were darkness. But now are ye light in the world. Walk as children of light. Children of light. Again, He, Christ, the light of the world. We are children of light. We are transmitters of His light. And this is based upon a union with Jesus Christ. So He dwells within us so that we, to a degree, become what He is. That's conformity to Christ. And the more conformed we are to Christ, the brighter our light in the world, which again is Christ. So, our source of light is a saving relationship with Jesus Christ, who is the light of the world. Now, in order to understand the words, ye are the light of the world, that's our function. Salt and light, two different functions, two different things completely, but they both speak of our influence, our testimony in the world. So in order to understand ye are the light of the world, just as it was with ye are the salt of the earth, we need to understand the nature of light. We need to understand the purpose of light. So let's consider several things that light does. And that's what is to identify our lives. And it will, the more conformed to Christ that we are. Light clarifies. The world, of course, is a place of darkness concerning the things of the Lord. Ye are the light of the world. As a result, our lives ought to bring some clarity to the Lord. Some clarity in the darkness in which we live. Wherever we are in the world, whatever our position is in the world, our life should dispel confusion and bring some clarity. And if we live consistent lives following Christ, that brings clarity. When we go back and forth, one day live for the Lord, next day live for self, and it's just back and forth all the time, that just adds to the confusion. So our lives are to bring some clarity. Our lives are to clarify who Christ is. Our lives are to clarify His Word. But again, when the life of a child of God is filled with hypocrisies and inconsistencies, that life just adds to confusion. It's not light. Light also reveals. The state of being revealed in verses 3 through 12. We've gone through that. All of that entire state of being, all the things that are included in that state of being, is a revelation of Jesus Christ. It's what Jesus Christ is. And the responsibility of each child of God is to walk, 1 John 2 verse 6, to walk even as He walked. And that's how we show forth His light. Our lives are to reveal Jesus Christ. And the more conformed we are to Christ, the more our lives reveal Jesus Christ. The way we do this is to abide in Him. That is, live in joyful trust and surrender to Him. The result is the attitude and the spirit and a life that points to Jesus Christ. Everything in our life is to point to Christ. We read in Psalm 34 and verse 5, they looked unto Him and were lighted. That is, they looked unto Him and they became radiant. As they looked, they had a radiancy about them. So the more that one looks upon the Lord, the more radiant their lives become, the more their lives reveal Jesus Christ. Light has an effect upon darkness. Light has an effect upon darkness. That goes without saying. But the function of light is to dispel darkness. Light has an immediate effect upon darkness. An immediate effect upon darkness. All these people, all of God's people today that just moan and groan and just carry on about how dark the world is. Yes, it's dark. But how sad that the lives of God's people do not affect the darkness. The darker the night, the more the light ought to be seen. So, yes, it's a time of darkness, but that's an opportunity for God's people to shine forth. So, light has an effect upon darkness. Now, light in the Bible, of course, is an emblem of knowledge. It's an emblem of purity. It's an emblem of truth. Darkness in the Bible is an emblem of ignorance. It's an emblem of error. It's an emblem of sin. And ye are the light of the world. And wherever there is light, darkness is affected. So if we are the light of the world, then our lives must have some effect upon the darkness that is around us. The Bible speaks of the power of darkness. In Luke 22, verse 53, speaks of the works of darkness. In Romans 13, verse 12, and Ephesians 5, verse 11. We read in Romans 2:19, we are light of them that are in darkness. The world lives in darkness, and we are the light of them which are in darkness. And the greater and more dense the darkness, again, the more manifest the light. Our lives should have an effect upon the darkness of our part of the world. Light also warns of danger. You're the light of the world. And wherever we are in the world, whatever our position is in the world, our life should serve as a beacon in the way. Light provides guidance. You're the light of the world. And again, wherever we are in the world, whatever our position is in the world, our life should serve as an example for others to follow. And we see this all through the Scriptures. Notice in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, he's speaking to the church that was located in Thessalonica. And we'll begin reading with verse 5 through verse 7. Paul is recounting his arrival in Thessalonica when the church there was organized and souls were saved. For our gospel came not unto you in word only, but also in power, and in the Holy Ghost, which describes the power, and in much assurance, as ye know what manner of men we were among you, for your sake. That is, we were an example to you. And you became followers of us, more importantly, and of the Lord, having received the word in much affliction, with joy of the Holy Ghost, so that ye were ensamples to all that believe in Macedonia and Achaia. They were examples. They were examples to believers. They were examples to unbelievers. That should be our life. Our life should be an example, not a bad example, but a good example. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 9, not because we have not power or authority, but to make ourselves an example unto you to follow us. And then notice Paul's instruction to Timothy. 1 Timothy 4, verse 12. Timothy was a young preacher, and he says in verse 12, let no man despise thy youth. That is, let no man think lightly of your youth, but be thou an example of the believers. Be an example of the believers in word, in conversation, which is overall lifestyle, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. Be thou an example to the believers. That's good advice. Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2. Verse 7. In all things, showing thyself a pattern of good works. In doctrine, showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity. He goes on to mention speech. But in all things, show thyself a pattern of good works. So a life parallel to Christ. Christ says, I am the light of the world. He says to you and I, ye are lights of the world. And the more we follow Him, the more our light reveals Jesus Christ, and the more of an example we become. Again, in 1 Timothy 4, verse 12, there's a sixfold example there. We are to be an example of the believers in word. That's in our speech, the way that we talk, our tone. Everything about our speech is to be an example. In conversation, overall conduct. In charity, that's in love. In spirit, that's our attitude. And then he mentions faith and purity. So our lives should serve as a guide to others. Our lives should be a guide to others. And they will be if we follow Christ and if we are what is stated in verses 3 through 12 of Matthew 5. Light, of course, can provide safety. It can prevent injury. And our lives should be an example. Should be such an example as to prevent some from bringing spiritual harm to themselves. Notice in 1 Timothy chapter 4 again. 1 Timothy chapter 4. And verse 16. Take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine. Continue in them. For in doing this, continuing in the doctrine, thou shalt both save thyself. He's not talking about salvation. He's talking about saving our lives rather than ruining our lives. You shall save thyself and them that hear thee. Them that hear thee. Again, he's talking to Timothy. He's giving Timothy advice as a preacher. And he says you need to take heed to doctrine. Make sure your doctrine is right. That will spare you from ruining yourself. But it will also spare those that hear thee. Again, many a sermon has saved lives. It's saved lives because people take heed and they reverse course. And that saves their life. It spares their life. And our life is to provide safety. That is, our example should not be a danger to anyone. Our life should not cause harm to others. Our life should save the lives of others if they follow. Light can also stimulate. Light can motivate. You're the light of the world. Light can stimulate, motivate. Light can inspire. Conformity to Christ causes one's life to inspire others, to flourish spiritually, and to follow Christ. We ought to so follow Christ that other believers say, I want to do that. I want to do that as well. That's light stimulating and motivating. And just like salt, light can be an irritant. Light can be very irritating. If you want to sleep, you need sleep, and someone comes in a dark room and turns on the light, it's irritating. Light can be an irritant. And Jesus said in John chapter 3 and verse 20, for everyone that doeth evil hateth the light. Everyone that doeth evil hateth the light. Neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. Light irritates them. And our lives ought to be an irritant to some. We should not try to irritate anybody. But just following Christ, that's going to irritate some people along the way. Notice in John chapter 3, verse 19. John chapter 3, verse 19. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light. Why? Because their deeds were evil. There are those who are in darkness, and they're very comfortable there. They live in sin, and they're comfortable there. They like it. They enjoy it. And when light comes into that darkness, then that disturbs their comfort. And it becomes an irritant. And you don't have to say a word to them. All you do is do what's right. And that irritates them because it rebukes them. So in that way, we are to be an irritant. Christ-likeness will be an irritant to many. To many. And, again, the child of God who manifests Christ in their life is going to be irritating to some. Light is to be seen. Ye are the light of the world. Now Christ stresses here in verse 14 and 15 of Matthew chapter 5 the public aspect of light. He says, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. You can't hide it. It's visible. He then went on to say, light, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel. So what Christ is saying here, by both the image of salt and light, more specifically light, there's no such thing as living the Christian life in secret. No such thing. It can't be done because it's visible. It can't be done. If you are living it in secret, you're not living it. Because if you live this life, it's going to be seen. It's so different from everything else that is out there that people can't help but see it. So, there's no such thing as living for Christ in secret. Now later in the sermon, let's go there, Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, Christ speaks of the fact that we're not to live our life to be seen. To be seen. Notice in Matthew 6, verse 1, take heed that ye do not your alms, that's good deeds to others, before men. Now, a lot of people put a period there, and that's where they stop. But when you do that, you have a wrong interpretation, and there's many that do. You're not to do your alms before men to be seen. To be seen. That is, that's not your purpose in doing the alms. That doesn't mean that they're unseen. It means that's not your purpose in doing them. Otherwise, ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. In other words, when somebody praises you for the alms that you've done, and you've done them to be seen, that's your reward. That's your reward. There's no reward in heaven. That is your reward. You did it to be seen. You were seen. You did it to be praised. You were praised. That's your reward. That's what he's saying. Verse 2. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound the trumpet. Don't call attention to yourself, because that's not the purpose of the alms. Before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have the glory of men. That's their purpose. They do it to be seen, that they may have the glory or the praise of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. And then he goes on to mention prayer. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues, in the corners of the streets. And here's why they do that they may be seen. That's the third time that they may be seen. They do it for the wrong reason. They have their reward. So Christ speaks of the fact that the Christian life is not to be lived for the purpose, and we have to stress that, for the purpose of being seen. But if you live the Christian life, it's going to be seen. It's a public life. A city on a hill cannot be hid. Men do not light a candle and try to hide it. But you do not do it for that purpose, to be seen. But your life will be seen. That's why ye are the light of the world. So it will be seen. And Jesus refers to that again in verses 14 and 15. He mentions a city on a hill. Now, a city on a hill can be seen distinctly from afar. You don't have to get right next to it. You can see it from a distance. And the life that we are called to live is visibly distinct from afar. But that's not why we do what we do, to be seen. But it will be seen. But again, what's your reason for doing what you do? The child of God, verse 15, does not wish to avoid their life being observed. You don't put your candle on a bushel. You don't avoid your life being observed. That's why you're here. But you don't live it to be observed. But you don't go out of your way to hide it. And that's what he's speaking of here. So when people light a candle, they don't attempt to conceal it, but place it where it can be of use, where it can be useful, where it can be helpful. So the child of God is never to conceal what they have been made by God's grace. We're not to conceal that. We're to just do and be what we are, a child of God. That's going to be visible. But you do not do it to be seen. You do not do it to receive praise from men. You do not do it to call attention to yourself. And then he goes on in verse 15, and he speaks of how our light is to be placed. You don't put it under a bushel. That is, you don't attempt to hide it, but you put it on a candlestick. There's other lights on that candlestick. You put it on a candlestick, and it giveth light to all that are in the house. Now again, the candlestick, Revelation chapter 1, verse 12, John saw 7 golden, rare and precious candlesticks. And in the midst of those candlesticks was Jesus Christ. In Revelation 1 and verse 20, Jesus explained the meaning of what John saw. And he said, the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. The 7 local churches mentioned in chapter 1, verse 11. And in chapters 2 and 3, they are Christ writes a letter to each one. So it speaks, that's where we're to place our light. On a candlestick. In a church of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now you read those letters to those 7 churches. And those churches were far from perfect. They were not perfect. They had flaws. They had blemishes. But they were still the place where the light would be the most useful and the most beneficial was upon a candlestick. Again, that shows the public influence of the light. The place where the light could best function was upon a candlestick. And so it is today. Churches do not create and manufacture light. Individual children of God do not create and manufacture light. They reflect it. They receive it from Christ. They reflect that light. And every one of the Lord's churches have the opportunity to be a lampstand shining forth Christ's light in a dark world. I don't understand. Many times, churches find themselves, the neighborhood deteriorates, and things get bad in the neighborhood, and the very first thing they do is sell their building and go somewhere else where it's not so bad. You're to be light in the dark. You don't go to a place of light to be light. It defeats our whole function. Well, it's dangerous. Well, the Lord takes care of that. The Lord take care of that. And I believe that. And I believe that churches should not use that as a reason to move their light. God's people, the Lord's churches, are looking for places that aren't so dark. But again, read the book of Acts. Churches were started in evil cities, wicked cities. Cities that were disagreeable to the philosophy of a God, to the doctrines of a child of God. But that's where God places light. That's where light is needed, in the dark. That in mind, notice Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2. Verses 15 and 16. Speaking to the church of Philippi. He says that you may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke, in the midst. In the midst. What that means is on all sides, and you're in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom the crooked and perverse nation ye shine as lights in the world. I would love to see a church when the neighborhood is going bad to say, this is our opportunity. God has given us an opportunity to shine in the dark. Oh, we got to get out of here. Our cars are going to get broken into. Holding forth, this is how our light shines. Holding forth the word of life. Holding conveys the idea of grasping and clinging to the word of God. Holding forth conveys the idea of making visible our life making visible Christ in our life. And again, this is in the midst of crookedness and perverseness. A bright and shining light manifesting God's work within us. And then notice, if we go back to Matthew 5, so we have our light on a candlestick. That light giveth light unto all that are in the house. And then we read in verse 16, let your light, it doesn't say let your light shine before men, but let your light so shine before men. That little word so means in the same manner that was indicated before. Let your light so shine before men means let your light shine in the same manner, the same way that a candle gives forth light upon a candlestick. Let it shine forth in that way. How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, by being what we ought to be in verses 3 through 12. That's how we do that. John 5:35, Jesus said of John the Baptist, he was a burning and shining light. What's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of letting our light so shine? Verse 16, so that they may see your good works. So you don't hide them. You don't do them to be seen, but that they may see your good works. The motive, that's the important thing. Here's the motive. And glorify your Father. And glorify your Father. That's the motive. That's the motive of having our light shine. That God would be glorified. So the life of a child of God is to show forth the radiance, the beauty, the magnificence of God. The life of a child of God is to praise, is to magnify, is to extol, is to honor God. Not drawing attention to ourselves, but drawing attention to the Lord. In other words, it is a visible life for His glory. Ye are the light of the world. Now, light is a form of energy. The life of a child of God is to be active. Now, when light energy ceases to move, it's absorbed by matter, it's absorbed by darkness. When that happens, it's no longer light. And so it is with our life. When our lives become absorbed by the darkness that's around us, we cease to be light. And so many people fall into this trap of Satan. Well, we've got to be more like the world so we can be a witness to them. How foolish. Once light is absorbed by the darkness, and it will be, it ceases to be light. Light has to have energy, has to keep moving, and the child of God must beware lest they be absorbed with the matter of this world. So ye are the salt of the earth, ye are the light of the world. That's true of us individually, that's true of us collectively. This is our function. This is our responsibility. And again, both salt and light have influence. They have effect. And the power of their influence, the power of their effect is that they are different. They are different from that which they come into contact. Different. That's where the power is. That's where the influence is. It's not becoming what is out there. It's being different from what's out there. When a church seeks to be like out there, they cease to be what they ought to be. When a child of God seeks to be what's out there, they cease to be what they've been left here to be. So again, we cannot be assimilated into the world system. If so, we lose our function as salt. We lose our function as light. In other words, our witness has little to no power and influence. We do not bear effective witness by being conformed into culture and society. Again, you're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. And we must not allow anything to dilute or dim our identity, our testimony, our usefulness in life. We have to just be what God has called us to be, do what God has called us to do. Our motivation in doing such is for His honor and for His glory. And you leave all the results of that with Him. You leave all the results of that with Him. Some people will be blessed. They will be happy. Others, just the opposite. But you leave all that with God. And you just be what you're called to be. And do what you're called to do. And be and do in the same manner as Christ. And that's how we are salt, and that's how we are light. Brother Ben, if you'll come and lead us